All right, welcome to another episode of Kuden Radio. Dai-Shihan Miller here from Warrior Concepts. Sensei Alexander is joining us a little bit late. Life gets in the way sometimes. Anyway, I want to start this episode. I'm going to start tonight with a question. Well, actually, maybe a couple of questions. First, when you go to class, right? You go to martial arts class, Ninjutsu, Dai-Shihan, whatever you want to call it, right? When you go to class, what do you think you're there to do? And secondly, when do you practice? Okay. Now, those probably sound like the same question. And I think for a lot of martial artists, they are the same question, right? They go to class to practice martial arts, right? That's what martial arts class is. You go to the dojo, you bow in, you warm up, right? The teacher gives you something to work on. You practice it for an hour or two. You bow out. And then you come back for the next class and you do it all over again. So if I were to ask, how often do you practice? A lot of students would probably answer, I go to class twice a week, or I train 3 nights a week. And I want you to notice something there, right? I asked, how often do you practice? And the answer that I get very often is how often somebody went to class, how often you attend class. But those are not necessarily the same thing, right? In fact, that's what we're going to be talking about tonight, because I think we can often confuse several different things that are all important, but that serve very different purposes in our training and our development. Going to class, practicing, and what I call training in the larger sense, right? And if we don't understand the difference, we can spend years attending classes, learning more techniques, earning rank, collecting information, and wondering why our actual capabilities don't seem to be developing at the same rate. So, tonight's episode is named after something my teachers used to say over and over again. Class time is not practice time, right? And then I kind of threw in a catchy subtitle. Well, it's not really catchy, right? Why class alone isn't enough for mastery. And before somebody misunderstands that title, I'm not saying you don't practice things during class. Of course you do, right? We're going to talk about that distinction. I'm also not saying class isn't important, right? As a matter of fact, it's quite the opposite, right? The teacher is important. Instruction is important. Correction is important. Working with different training partners is important. Being exposed to things you wouldn't have discovered on your own is important, right? But there's a difference between the practice that happens as part of learning something in class and the practice required afterward to actually develop that thing into your own capability, into your own level of, we'll call it skill proficiency. And that difference is where I want to spend some time, right, during this episode. Because two students can attend the exact same classes. They can have the exact same teacher. They can receive the exact same lessons. They can be shown the same techniques, right? And even work with many of the exact same training partners. And 6 months later, they can be very different martial artists. Why is that? Right? So that's one of the questions that we're going to explore. And it has quite a bit to do with what happens during all of those hours when sensei isn't standing there. Okay? So I think this one's going to get interesting, because we're going to step on a couple of assumptions about martial arts training that people may not even realize that they're carrying around. And for those of you watching live, right, I'd actually like you to answer this before we go into the show, right? Don't overthink it. Just give me your first answer. What percentage of your actual martial arts practice happens outside of formal class? Now, a little caveat there, a little sidebar, right? If your training is pretty much just, YouTube videos or distance things, well, then it's all out of class. I'm talking about what's the percentage that's not with a regular teacher who is responsible, right, as your guide, as your mentor, to move you through the training, to move you through the art, right, to get where you say you want to go. Okay? What percentage of our practice happens outside of a formal class? Okay. Not how much martial arts you think about, not how much martial arts content you watch on YouTube, right? How much actual practice do you do when there isn't a formal class happening? Okay. So 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, almost all of it, right? Drop a number in the comments. We're going to come back to that, right? So let's get into tonight's episode. And as we say often, let's see how deep the rabbit hole goes. Okay. So I'll see you when we get back.
So, the big question is this. How are self-defense and success-minded people like us, concerned citizens worried about protecting ourselves, our loved ones, and the things we care about from the monsters we know exist in the world? How do we train in a way that gives us the skills, knowledge, and understanding we need without becoming paranoid fighters or killers ourselves, and yet still allows us to be the hero protector the world needs us to be? That's the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Jeffrey Miller, and welcome to Kuden Radio, real training for real people in a real world.
And we are back. At the moment, I am flying solo here, so if I seem to be a little sidetracked or trying to find little things or whatever, I am. Since Alexander is running a bit late tonight, he'll be on, but got other things to take care of. So anyway, that being said, I got to flip buttons over here. All right, let's just do a quick check to see who's on. Let's see. Alan's on. Kyle's on. Warlock 1973 is on. All right. So, cool. Other people are still signing in. Numbers are climbing. That's fine. I will check back in just a bit, but we got a lot to cover, and I want to do that, right? So, over the past several episodes, before that, right, with this kind of phase 2, right, of kind of an ongoing series. So for a while, we spent some time looking at things that can get in the way, right, of our training. On or around, what was that, episode 318, 319, something like that, right? We started taking a look at the opposite side, right? The prescription to fixing a lot of those things, right? Jazzing things up, putting things in place, or making sure that things are in place, or understanding the place of some of the things that allow us to succeed, right? Allow us to excel, allow us to get what we need the way, I don't know, past masters intended, but the counterbalance to that is in a way that, right, gets things street ready. Okay. So covered curriculum, what a good curriculum looks like for a modern warrior protector, right? Even if we're looking at traditional stuff, what does that look like, right? And then we took a look at getting that from the curriculum, from the paper, right, that it's written on, into the classroom, right? It's pretty much the teacher's job. Okay. So what I want to take a look at for this one is I want to drill deeper yet. And next episode, we're going to go deeper than that, right? And then we should have a pretty good idea of where momentum comes from, where clarity comes from, those kind of things. Okay. But either way, since I am my own producer at the moment until since Alexander gets on, let me check again to see if anybody else signed in. If you are, whether you're new or you're returning or whatever, right? Just kind of drop a hello in there. Phil Jones is on. Good evening. All right. So if you haven't checked in, go ahead and do that so that I know that you're here and I can field questions as they come up. Just bring my notes up over here so I don't get lost. All right. Again, just as a kind of a reminder for everybody who's new to the show, right? New to Kuden. This is where we explore the lessons behind the lessons, the principles, the concepts, experiences, history, strategies, right? And sometimes misunderstandings that surround what we're doing in the dojo, right? And tonight we're continuing a conversation that's really been developing across the last bunch of episodes, right? Because we've been talking about development, right? Not simply what techniques are in ninjutsu or what does somebody need to learn to get the next rank, right? But how does a human being, right, one of us, right, unless if you're an alien, well, maybe you're not in the right place. How does a human being actually develop capability, not learn skills, not learn or not pick up an ability, right, but to actually develop capability, right? That implies solving problems. That implies actual application, function, right? That kind of thing, not just learning thing, right? And that distinction matters a lot, right? A couple episodes ago, we talked about, like I said, we talked about curriculum, right? And I made the argument that a curriculum shouldn't merely be a list of techniques. Okay? A good curriculum is a developmental map. Okay? It identifies problems the student needs to become capable of solving and then organizes lessons, skills, drills, techniques, experiences, and progressively more difficult challenges to help that student develop those capabilities. Okay, I'll give you a quick example. In our module 2, there is a drill. It's called Senundo, right? Now, we start people in module 1 with this, and for those of you who are familiar with the Kuden kind of stuff, that's okay. I've just taken the Q levels and organized it based on attack type, where we are in the attack timeline. Okay, so module 1, obviously, like the punch is already coming or he's already on you, that kind of stuff, right? So these things show up in certain levels, but we introduce the concept, we introduce a specific strategy, we introduce maybe a tactical control method or whatever at given levels. Doesn't mean that that's now what we're doing. That's the new box of toys, right? It means that we're adding a layer, we're adding additional options for somebody, right? For a student, so that they're not what I call a one-hit wonder. Okay. But anyway, module 2, we give this thing a name that we do in mod 1, but we don't focus on it a lot. Okay. Senundo is the ability to go from kamae to kamae without losing the benefits of kamae, right? Cover, balance, protection of targets, those kind of things, right? So we're not taking up kamae and then we're dropping our limbs and putting them back up again. It's a big freaking open window, right? So we have the drill that we introduce in module 2 works with those kamae and that strategy, which is long range defensive angling, profiling the body. So we're using ichimonji, seigan, doko, these profiled positions, right? Long range. So the first thing a student learns how to do is just go from left forward, right? They step right naname, back, right? Left forward, Seigan, Ichimonji, Doko, whatever, right? And then the next punch comes and they shift it. And so what they're doing is they're practicing going from kamae to kamae without breaking kamae. And then they want to pick that up to where they can do that, but now they're hitting the right angle and staying closed, right? So instead of dropping the limbs and pick them back up again, right? Everything's in place, including this. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk away from that limb so that guard was never, it never goes away, right? So there's that, right? But there's different aspects to this. There's footwork, there's body torso work, there's limb work, that kind of stuff, right? So these are all capabilities, right? Can I do this or do that? Do I have the ability to stay in kamae as I shift and I move from one place to another? We call it the zigzag exercise, right? Because they're going right rear, left rear, right rear, left rear. Keeps the bad guy having to like chase him down, and it keeps the bad guy from gaining momentum and power on a direct line like most fighters are used to doing, right? Nose to nose, toe to toe, that kind of thing. So it breaks that pressure that they're trying to put on us, okay? So eventually that becomes a capability, right? Where it doesn't matter if we're doing the same kamae or we're doing that zigzag pattern or we're moving side or forward or back or whatever, right? Kamae never breaks and we stay behind the shield and it keeps the bad guy constantly chasing us down. So he's always a step behind, right? That's a capability, right? Can I take over the leading of the dance, so to speak, right? And cause him to fall behind. But to do that, I have to have the ability to use adaptive footwork. I have to have the ability to stay calm under pressure. I have to have the ability to not let my kamae break, right? I have to have the trust in my kamae, right? Living the whole idea that like in the Gyoko you with Ichimonji no kamae, the feeling being that I'm so confident in my kamae that I can win with just this. Okay. Those kind of things, they all lead to a capability of getting a step ahead of my attacker and causing him to have to work harder to get at me. That's a capability. Okay. So anyway, so we started there, right? And then last week we moved from the map to the guide, right? The curriculum may tell us where we're going, but the instructor has to look at that student that's actually standing in front of him or her, right? And ask, where is this particular student right now, right? What do they need? What do they need now? What do they need next, right? How do I communicate this with them, right? It's one of the reasons why I always run people in my dojo who want to be instructors. They all have to go through an instructor training program, right? As a matter of fact, we're starting another one in September, and this one I'm opening up to long distance folks that, and they don't even have to be teaching ninjutsu or bujinkan or whatever, right? Because it's not about that. It's about a skill set that make all this stuff like make sense. Anyway, right? So how do I communicate this to them in a way that they understand it quickly, whatever, and whatever, right? So then there's other questions too, like what do I need to demonstrate? What can I explain, right? What do I need to correct? What problem should I let them struggle with to discover on their own, or let them struggle with until I give them the answer? And it's not to be a dick. Okay. It's part of the learning process. It's how we human beings learn. Okay. When do I give them the answer? Right. And when do I let them discover it for themselves? Right. That's teaching. Those are teaching skills. Right. We can learn how to do the art. We can learn the techniques and all that kind of stuff. But having learned them, and it's not that you can't show them to somebody or, have them do step by step or whatever, but the skills that we're learning as a martial artist are not the same skills that we learn or that we develop over time, right? Some people could do it I'm trying to help people do it intentionally rather than accidentally, but either way, right? But the skills are different. The skills that we're teaching are not the same skills as those that we use to effectively teach. Okay. Anyway, right. But again, that's teaching, right? But there's another person in this relationship, right? And tonight, right, during this episode, we're going to talk about that person. Okay. I said we're going to keep drilling down. We went curriculum, went teacher, right? How it gets translated in class. But tonight, the focus is going to be on the student. Okay. Because if episode 319 was about the map, and last week's episode 320, right, was about the guide, then tonight is about the traveler. Okay. Think again, use the map analogy, right? We can have a map, right? We know where we live, we know where we're going or whatever, but we might have a family member or a friend or a coworker or whatever, right? Who lives in our local area, right? And has gone there before, right? And so they go, oh, yeah. So what you do is you jump onto I-80 and you take that west until you get, right? So they could give you these things and then you got that in your head and all that kind of stuff, right? Now, there was lots of other teachers before that, right? The person who taught you how to drive, the person who, helped you develop those skills, whatever, okay? But somebody kind of pointed the way, right? But at some point, we, as the traveler, have to hop in the car, right? Or whatever, right? What we're talking about now is the person who actually has to walk the road, drive the route, whatever, okay? Because no matter how good the map is, no matter how good the curriculum is, right? I don't care if we're talking about the Densho and, Shoden, Chuden, okay, or we're talking about an actual curriculum that a teacher developed, right? No matter how good that map is, and no matter how skilled the guide is, the guide, the teacher, can't walk the path for you. All right? And that brings us to another line from the Student Creed. Remember, I started reciting from that, I don't know, an episode or two ago, right? There's another line in our Student Creed that new students have to learn, right? That I keep returning to, right? We've already talked about, I believe in what I study, right? We have to believe that. So I believe in myself, right? I have to believe that I'm valuable enough to protect, right? I am confident or confident enough, right, that I'm not going to bail on myself and quit once I get started. I can accomplish my goals, that kind of thing, right? I have to, that's a commitment statement, right? It's not, I can accomplish my goals. It's, I can accomplish my goals, right? Second part, right? I believe in what I study. So the first part is I have to believe in myself, right? I have to believe in my ability to follow through on things, right? I have to believe that I am valuable enough to protect. Otherwise, my decisions around these things, going to class, paying for class, sticking with it through challenges and all those kind of things, right? So there's three parts to this. The teacher is the third part, but the belief in these three things, if I don't have one or more of these things, chances of me succeeding going to be pretty slim. These are things that people are usually not introduced to because, we're just focused on learning cool moves. But it's these things, these beliefs, these character traits. They fuel the beast that's going to be doing the do, so to speak, right? But anyway, so we've been talking about I believe in what I study, and that's really a statement about, okay, I've tried out the program and I've seen the curriculum, and I'm like, yeah, I think this is going to get me where I want to be. This is going to give me the lessons to develop the skills to be that warrior protector that can stop some jackass from hurting me or somebody I care about or whatever, right? So there's that, right? But the next part of that is the second part of the creed, right? I believe when I study, the next part of that is I'm disciplined, okay? Because discipline isn't demonstrated by agreeing that practice is important, okay? Discipline isn't just doing what we're supposed to in class, okay? It's not demonstrated by wanting to become skilled. It isn't demonstrated by paying tuition either. Okay? And it isn't automatically demonstrated by showing up for class. I mean, showing up matters, right? But showing up is where the lesson begins. I just made up these signs I'm going to hang up in the dojo, and they'll rotate around and whatnot. But one of them is your training begins when you take responsibility, not when you take a class. Okay. So where I'm really going with this is another question. And the question is, what do you do with the lesson after you leave class? Okay. What do you do with the lesson after you leave class? All right. So before we dive into that, let me just surf over to my other section here and see who else is signed in. So what else do we have here? Practicing or studying 25 to 30% outside of the dojo. Thanks, Alan, for that. Let's see. Alyssa, good evening. Mr. Born Divine, or as we affectionately know him around the dojo. Oops, I hurt myself. I'm just kidding. Right? No. Well, maybe some days. Some days. Anyway, good to see you on, sir. I appreciate it. He's one of my instructors, so I like to pick and have fun. Anyway, all right. So I don't see anybody else. So I don't see any answers to my questions either. But that's all right. You guys just kick back, your comfy chairs, relax with some chamomile tea or whatever, and we'll go for a ride. So anyway, then we'll all make a big deal when Sensei Alexander pops in. How about that? All right. Anyway, let me get back over to my notes. Okay, so I want to start somewhere that may seem completely unrelated to martial arts. Okay. I want you to, this is going to be painful for some of you. I know, right? I want you to think back to school, elementary school, middle school, high school, right? Don't be too traumatic about it, right? But I want you to think back to school, right? Whatever period you remember most clearly. I don't mean like period in the day. I just mean high school, middle school, whatever, right? Pick an era, right? Pick a period or time frame that you remember most clearly, right? You went into a classroom. There was a teacher. The teacher introduced something, right? They introduced a lesson, okay? Maybe it was math. Maybe it was vocabulary. Maybe it was history. I don't know. Maybe it was science, okay? Let's say it was math, okay? Let's say it was math, right? Teacher puts a problem on the board, okay? They explain the concept, right? They show you how the formula works. Okay? I know for some of you, I know I'm shaking already myself because math is not my nemesis. I can do math up until algebra 2. Don't talk to me about after that, right? But anyway, right? So, but either way, right? They show you how the formula works, okay? And then maybe everybody works through a couple of examples together, right? Maybe there's some stuff on the board. Maybe somebody gets called up to solve for whatever, or maybe just everybody, by show of hands, what's the next step, that kind of thing. Maybe there's a worksheet that gets passed out. Who knows, right? But we're working on the things together, right? The teacher walks around the room. They look over your shoulder, right? They see where you or somebody's making mistakes, right? Maybe you put a decimal in the wrong place. Maybe you're applying the wrong operation, or whatever. Okay. I know math terms. Anyway, right? Maybe you understand the formula, but you're doing one of the steps at a sequence. So what's a teacher do, right? Teacher corrects you, right? Then you do another program or another problem, right? Better. Okay. Maybe another. Okay. Good. Right. So now you've demonstrated that you basically understand what you're supposed to do, right? How to get this answer with these variables, with whatever it is that you're working with, right? And then what happens? Teacher says, okay, problems 1 through 20 for homework. And somewhere in the classroom, you could almost hear the collective groan, right? Homework, right? Maybe you even were part of that little that groan. Anyway, right? So, right, you know what it is, right? You mean I have to do more of this when I get home, right? Like I had shit to do, man. I just spent all day in school, right? I want to stop off and have a milk with the boys, or whatever, right? So, and we hear it over and over again, right? We now a lot of us hear it from our kids or grandkids, right? Where teachers always giving us work to do, right? They're taking away my free time, whatever. Okay. Now, this is going to matter. This is going to matter a lot. A lot of these things matter for the learning, but a lot of these things matter for maybe our perception on how learning is supposed to take place. Okay. Now, all of those things, right? I'm making fun of them, right? That wasn't particularly the way I thought about it. I was one of those geeks and whatnot. I liked school, but let's be fair, right? That's a pretty common attitude, right? And I think something interesting may have happened to many of us there, right? While we were there, right? Because we began associating the thing we were supposed to do between lessons with an externally imposed obligation, right? The teacher was making us do homework. The teacher was giving us extra work, right? The teacher was taking time away from the things we'd rather be doing, right? But what was homework actually for? Was it punishment? Usually, no. Okay? We probably didn't figure this out until we got older. And to be honest, a lot of people that I have met still haven't learned it. Okay. What is homework? Whether it feels good or bad, what is homework? Okay. The teacher had just shown you how to solve the problem, right? You had performed a few examples while the teacher was available to observe and correct you, right? But 3 corrected problems or 5 corrected problems or whatever it was, right, during class weren't nearly enough to create fluency. Okay. You needed repetitions. You needed to encounter slightly different versions of the problem, right? You need to discover where you still hesitated, right? Where the brain cramp kicked in, right? You needed to find the places where you thought you understood something, but actually didn't, right? And through all that moaning and groaning and being forced by your parents, whatever, right? Maybe something happened, okay? But either way, more importantly, you needed to attempt solving those problems or whatever the homework was, right? Whatever subject it was, when the teacher wasn't standing beside you. That's a very different test. Okay? Because while the teacher's there, I can say, is this right? What do I do next? Right? Do I divide here? Which formula was it again? Right? But now I'm sitting at the kitchen table by myself, or maybe a desk in my room, whatever, right? Problem number 7 is a little different. And suddenly, wait a minute. I thought I understood this. Okay. And that's not evidence or anything like that, that the lesson failed or whatever, right? It's part of the learning process. Okay. In that moment, you've just discovered the boundary between what you recognized while somebody was teaching you, while they were right there in the same space, and what you can actually remember and reproduce independently. Okay. That boundary is incredibly important. And martial arts students encounter the exact same thing. Right? We see it all the time. Right? Test comes up and tell a student, okay, you know, depending on what their rank is, right? You can either tell your partner what to throw at you, or maybe I'll do it, right? Okay, they're going to throw a hook punch, and I want you to use X kamae, or you pick one of your kamae, right? And evade it, and then do something, right? Follow up. And they'll get to a certain point, and then like they'll either finish with something and look over at me, right? Or they'll get stuck at a certain point and they'll look over at me or one of the other black belts on the testing panel, right? And my typical comeback is do something, right? We've taught you everything you need to know right for that moment right now. First day of class. The moment you have a brain glitch, put some distance between you and him and get into a kamae that makes his next move harder. Okay. So if you forget, bail out, move, roll, step, whatever. Okay. And then what I remind them is neither I nor any of the black belts are going to be in the parking lot or wherever when you're getting jumped. Okay. I promise you, we're not going to be sitting behind the Chevy in the parking lot yelling, do your ichimonji, shoot out of the neck, you know. No, I promise. If we're around, we're going to step in to help you. Okay. But right, proficiency is not dojo good enough when everything's happening a certain way under a certain framework, right? Where the teacher's always there to be able to bail you out or to ask questions, or your training partner will let you stop and try again. Now, is that part of the process? Yes. Okay. But there's something to be said for practicing and using our own intuition and our own strategic thinking processes, right, to work through problems on our own, right, and try that out. Okay. But I don't like being wrong. We're fucking human living on planet Earth. Get used to it. Okay. Warriors, it's not that they don't worry about being wrong, and it's not that warriors are perfect. Okay. Warriors make decisions. Seconds after you make a decision, you will know whether it was a good decision or not. Okay. Yeah, but like now what? Make another decision. Okay. Keep fucking moving. Yeah, well, what if I get hit? What of it? If you get clocked on your pivot point in your skull and you can't ride it off and you take a little nappy nap, well, no worries. Okay. If you get hit and you're not down and out, you keep freaking moving. Okay. See, that's a whole different skill that people don't practice either. Resilience. Okay. So those have nothing to do with the self-defense technique or the martial arts move or the kata or the skill. Capability is, can you take a hit and keep on moving? Some hits, you won't be able to keep moving. Other hits, you will. But if pain or overwhelm or embarrassment because I got hit or whatever gets in the way, well, then there's no martial art or martial art technique in the freaking universe that can save me from that. Okay. So again, this boundary between being in an environment, right, and being able to fix things or having that safety net while somebody was teaching you and what you can actually reproduce independently. Okay. That boundary is huge. Okay. I mean, when I say huge, I mean like important, really important. Okay. And it doesn't matter if we're talking about school or we're talking about the dojo. Okay. We encounter the exact same thing. Right. So here's an interesting thought, perspective, idea, right? What if I told you that class can create the illusion of ability? Right? You're standing in the dojo, sensei demonstrates the technique, you watch it, maybe he demonstrates it, I don't know, 2 times, 3 times. If it's me, who knows, 6 or 7 times, right? And then you pair up, right? Your partner gives you the attack that that was just demonstrated, right? You know what's coming. You know which technique you're supposed to do, right? We've talked about this in previous episodes, right? I call it that psychic martial arts, right? Your partner knows which technique you're supposed to perform. You both just watch sensei do it, right? And sensei's walking around the room, right? So you try it. Something doesn't feel right. Sensei comes over, move your foot there, move your foot here, or maybe they do it like I do in some classes and yell, no, or whatever, right? But either way, right? Okay, right? I know I messed that up or whatever it is, right? So either way, right? Try again, right? Okay. So better that time. Okay, cool, right? Or you might hear, okay, don't pull with your arm, move your body. Okay, all right, try again. Okay, better, right? After 3 or 4 reps, right? I got it. Okay. Do you? Maybe. But what exactly have you got? Right? What does I got it mean? You may now understand the basic lesson. That's important. You may have done it correctly or correctly enough for your level that 1 or 5 times or whatever, right? All those are important things. You may have corrected the biggest mechanical mistake that you were making. Also important. Okay? You may now be able to reproduce the movement under essentially the same conditions in which you learned it. Okay. He's throwing a straight punch, ski, whatever, right? And you, right? Okay. Good. Awesome. Right. But that's not necessarily the same as having developed the capability that he throws a punch, right? Like we can fulfill on the actual description of some of the kata that are not uketsuki, right? It's he attacks, he punches at your face, right? You receive, doesn't say how, right? You break the stars of the arm. The hell are they? And how do I do that? And whatever that means, right? Oh, and by the way, now he kicks at you because kata just implied that whatever I did, he recovered quickly enough to keep the attack going, or he's doing something, whatever, save his ass, stay in the fight, whatever it is, right? And I have to deal with that, right? And I have to get him to a point where he's destabilized and I have time to get something in because he's not throwing shit at me, right? And I have time and stability and wherewithal to be able to do that. Okay, quickly, easily, right? That kind of thing, right? There's a bunch of capabilities in there, right? So when we say a punch is coming, the translation or the translation description for koku, renyo, a lot of these kata and gyokuri, right? It doesn't say uketsuki. I know some of the kata lists that are passed around, right? Say that, right? Or in the dojo, maybe you're not doing Bujinkan, you're not doing Ninjutsu, you're not doing Taijutsu, right? Maybe you're doing something else, okay? But there's certain prescribed punches, or we go to competitions, and there's the general way that people punch. Okay, great. Okay, that's good. What if the guy that's actually trying to take your head off at the moment because they want your wife, your money, whatever, right? doesn't attack that way. Okay. And I think this is one of the places where martial arts students unintentionally deceive themselves. That's not you guys, because you're all enlightened. Okay. Again, they're not doing it dishonestly. Right? They're not trying to fool themselves. Right. It's a perfectly understandable mistake. The technique worked. Sensei said it looked better. Your partner went down. You did 5 reps. Whatever. Right. Class moved on. Okay. So you train your brain checks the box learned. But learned is not the same thing as let's call it available, right? And it certainly isn't the same thing as reliable. Okay, like I need to step back, profile my body, and get limbs in between me and him as quickly as possible to maintain space, whatever, right? And I don't have to think about it. Right? That's reliable, right? Somebody tosses me a towel, I don't have to like take up position, catch it, tell people to stop talking. I got to concentrate, whatever, right? Before I can start drying off. Okay. What I'm talking about with like capabilities is I use this analogy a lot. I need to run to the store for something. My head is just all wrapped around the store, where it is in the store, maybe some little things like that, right? I give very little attention to getting in the car, starting the car, backing out of my driveway, right? Following all the traffic laws and stuff like that. But the control of this quarter ton or whatever it is machine that's wrapped around me, and I'm only touching a couple of parts of it, and I can steer it around traffic. I can not hit the kid who almost stepped out, off the curb or whatever, right? That's capability. Right? So, but what's the image that we carry of martial arts practice, right? So I think there's another cultural image sitting maybe behind this or beneath this, right? And that is, what does martial arts class look like in the movies or on television or in old pictures, documentaries, right? Whatever, okay? Very often looks something like this. It's rows of students. Everybody's in a military-like formation, instructor at the front or wherever, right? And then what you hear, each, everybody punches, right? Knee, there's another punch. Son, there's another punch, right? 10 punches, 20 punches, 50, whatever, right? Somewhere in the mix in there, something else is called, Zempo, Geri, whatever, right? And now we're doing front kicks, okay? Everybody's doing the same thing, or everybody, whatever, right? They're repeatedly kicking, or they're performing the same kata on count, or whatever, okay? And I'm not saying there's anything inherently wrong with line drills and things like that, right? We do line drills, right? As a matter of fact, tonight I had students line up and do their kamae, okay? Maybe 3 reps. I think tonight we did 3. Sometimes I do 5, right? I say ichi. As they move into position, right? Ichi sir, knee sir, that kind of thing, right? And I know it doesn't sound like that's not officially Bujinkan. That sounds like karate. Well, that's not my fault. Okay. Anchoring bias is a bitch. Anyway, right? But either way, they're doing these things. I'm watching. I'm also keeping track of like when they're saying ichi sir, knee sir, right? That's about exhaling, right? They have to inhale before they move so they can exhale and say the words. And where is that coming out in the, right? Because we're syncing breathing with movement. That's a huge part of the training as well. Okay. But either way, right? I'm watching, I'm looking at posture, I'm looking at and listening to breathing and timing. I'm looking at whether the movement begins with tension, or the shoulders topple first, or the face goes forward as the leg reaches back, whatever, right? I'm looking at whether they're actually getting into kamae, or they're just, I don't know, arranging their arms into something that resembles the picture that they have in their head or in a book or something like that, right? I'm making corrections. right? There's a purpose to those repetitions, right? But you'll notice something. 3 to 5 repetitions, not 50, not 20, not even 10. And it's the rare day that we do 5 on each side. Okay. Usually it's 3. Okay. Why? Because once I can see that you understand the movement and that you fix something or you understand the correction, then you don't need me standing there counting reps for you. You can do that yourself. And I was explicitly taught that by my own teachers, okay, including Hatsumi Sensei. Whether we were talking about punches, push-ups, stances, whatever it happened to be, the message was essentially, you don't need me watching you do 20 of those, right? We have limited time in class. We have limited class time, right? Especially in an art as broad as this one. Holy crap, right? There's too much to teach. There's too much to explore. There's too much that actually requires access to the teacher. Why would we eat up 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour of that precious contact time having the teacher count repetitions or watch us do 50 push-ups or 10, 20, 50, whatever, repetitions of the kamae or of the technique, right? When that particular student is perfectly capable of doing that on their own. Okay. Think about the economics of that. Right? Yes, there's a cost to it. There's a cost to everything that we do. And I don't mean money. I'm talking about time. Okay. If I have 1 hour with my teacher, what should I spend that hour doing? Well, whatever sensei says. Okay. That's a given. However, okay, what should that time be spent on? And the answer is something I literally cannot do without him or her. Or something I could have done in my living room yesterday. Which one? Okay. Something I literally cannot do with him or her, or something I could have done in my living room or in my backyard or in my garage or wherever, right? Yesterday, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, whatever, right? Okay. And that's how I was taught to think about class. It's also how I was taught to think about responsibility and those kind of things. And my side of the teacher-student equation, not my side as a teacher, my side as a student. Because when I go visit my teachers, I'm on the other side of the equation. You know, I don't show up as a teacher trying to look good. No. I don't pay what I pay to go to Japan to be told that I understand everything and everything is great. Freaking hope not, right? Otherwise, it's one hell of an expensive vacation. I go to be told, no. I go to be told that I'm wrong. I need to know. I need a list of things to fix when I go back. Okay. So again, here's where we bump into that nuance, right? Practice in class versus practice between classes. Right? This is where I want to make a distinction, right? So nobody hears me saying something I'm not saying. There is practice in class, right? Of course there is, right? If I teach you a movement, you need to attempt it. I need to see what happens when your body tries to reproduce what I demonstrated, right? Because you may have interpreted something incorrectly, right? Your structure may be wrong. You may have physiological habit patterns from a previous art, an injury, whatever, right? Your timing may be wrong. You may be compensating for poor balance with muscular strength, right? You may be moving the arm when you think you're moving the body, right? Who knows, right? You may not even realize you're doing it. So yes, attempt, feedback, correction, attempt again. That's practice. Right? Not arguing that point. But not B-U-T-T, just one T, right? But, however, right? That type of practice, in-class practice, its primary purpose is often instructional. Okay? We're using those repetitions to improve the student's understanding and establish, right, to kind of get things to a place where they're good enough. They're sufficiently correct, right? They've got the model correct enough for further work. Okay? Just like in school. We practice a couple of things to get the formula down, right? And now we're going to go home and I got 20 problems. No. We have 20 practice models to apply the formula to make sure that we get good at it. Okay? So that later we don't have to freaking remember how. Okay, do I solve for the things inside the parentheses first, or do I? Okay? It's the same thing, right? And the practice between classes serves another purpose, right? And that's where you begin taking the model you've been given, right? And kind of checking in on your own nervous system, right? And answering the question, can I actually do this, right? Can I do it again? Can I do it again? Can I do it slower? Can I do it from the other side? Without watching sensei, without copying the person beside me, without somebody reminding me which foot moves when and where, right? Without somebody telling me what comes next. Okay? Now we've entered a different developmental environment. And here's the thing, both matter. Both matter. It's kind of like in meditation, right? Most people think of meditation as what we call duration meditation, where we sit for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is, right? Focus on the breathing, or we're doing some kind of visualization or whatever, right? And a lot of people want the benefits of meditation, but their lives are so hectic and whatever. They can't carve out the time, or they can't calm themselves enough for it, or whatever, right? Great. Okay. How about if we try a different type? Okay. Spontaneous meditation, where we practice for 30 seconds to 30 minutes, just practicing to go from whatever we're doing to calm, relaxed, focus, whatever it is, like flipping a switch, right? And then as soon as that's done, flip a switch, go right back to whatever the next thing is. Okay. We can do it at red lights. Now we can do it in between phone calls. We can do it, going to the bathroom, whatever, right? We just go in, door closes. And so now what we're doing is we're practicing to flip a switch to get into that and not taking our time to get into it. It's the same thing, right? Okay. Two different ways to look at practice, and they both matter. Okay. If you practice a misunderstood movement 24 times, 500 times, 5,000 times, okay, congratulations, right? You may become extremely good at doing it wrong. Okay. Now, I miss him a lot. I just lost a student this past March. Richard was late 80s, I think, maybe 90. He enrolled in training 1990, 1991, something like that. Okay. One of my earliest students. And Richard was a farmer by lifestyle, but he also worked for the post office and whatever. But every morning, Richard practiced religiously, right? there for a while. He wasn't just training with us, he was also doing Tai Chi. So, and he'd tell us, like, every morning, right, I do this with the animals, I feed them or whatever, and then I do a Tai Chi form, and then I'll practice something we did in class last night or whatever. Cool. Right. I might see Richard. Usually I saw him twice a week during planting and harvesting season. I might not see him for a couple of weeks, but I could always guarantee that he was practicing. And I know that because he'd come back and like he'd be able to do certain movements way, way faster. But he and I used to laugh because he would misunderstand something in class. And between that day and the next time I saw him in class, let's say it was a week later, right? Well, he had practiced that movement, what, 5, 6, 7 times? Okay. I don't know how many reps he did in the morning when he was practicing, but he did that every day 4. So the reason why we were laughing was because now we had to fix it, and he had to undo a mistake that he got really good at doing. And we just used to laugh at him, right? But it usually wasn't a big fix. It was just, a little adjustment kind of thing, right? But his body was 80, 90% there. Okay. So, and that's why like instruction and correction matter. A lot of people believe they can get by without a martial arts instructor or whatever, because you just watch some YouTube videos and figure it out. Okay. But that's why those things matter. Okay. Because again, he's going to learn, he's going to go practice it, he's going to come back, he's going to do something in class. Everybody does it, right? And then another correction happens, or it doesn't. Well, it's another correction about that thing, right? Or it's another correction about something because that's now fixed. Okay. But if you receive, let's say you go to class and you get, just borrowing a word here, right? Perfect instruction, right? There's nothing wrong with it. Okay. There's no mistakes in it or whatever. You get the good instruction, and then you do almost no repetitions until the next class. Now you're creating the opposite problem. Okay. That problem is that you continually get information, you get new techniques, you get new skills, you get new ways of doing things, you get new hanka, whatever, right? That you haven't given yourself enough time or opportunity to get into muscle memory, to get into the system. And then, I don't know, a week later, month later, a couple of ranks later, you bump into a new technique or whatever that's highly dependent on one or more skills or techniques that we learned previously. That should be a walk in the park by that point. And now they're not. And again, not you guys, because you're all enlightened. But anyway, I thought I heard something. Does that mean that Sensei Alexander, he's here? That's it. I told you guys, make a big deal. Yay! Right. Hey James, how you doing? Sensei's a dick.
I'm good.
Everything good? Life's good? Body's
Yes,
married? Whatever.
My son has started his extra orientation this week.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Son's first week in college.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Everything's going well so far?
So far, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, good. So I'll let you take over for things now, but anybody else sign in or check in? Anybody else? Last person that I knew that checked in was Mr. Born Divine. I know him from somewhere, I think, maybe. Any questions, any comments?
No, I don't see anything. Mr. Divine's comment was the last.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, so let's look at a two-student experiment, so to speak, right? Let's imagine two students, okay? We'll just, for simplicity's sake, right? We'll call them student A and student B, right? Who would name their kid A and who would name their kid B? I don't know. But either way, right? Student A, student B. Same dojo, same teacher, same rank. Okay? Roughly similar physical ability, right? They attend the same two classes every week, same days. We'll call it Monday and Thursday, right? They see the same technique demonstrations. They hear the same explanations. They work on the same curriculum, right? They get approximately the same amount of correction. Okay. Monday night, class ends. Student A goes home. Tuesday, he spends 15 minutes working through the footwork since they corrected Monday night. Okay. That's it. 15 minutes. Wednesday, maybe 10 minutes. Thursday, comes back to class. Okay. Student B goes home Monday night and doesn't think about the movement again until Thursday when he walks back through the dojo door. Okay. Now let's extend that. Week after week, month after month. Student A isn't doing some Rocky montage, right? He's not doing some Rocky montage, right? He's not training 4 hours a day on a mountain, right? Or under an icy cold waterfall or whatever, right? He may simply be racking up small amounts of intentional work between lessons, between classes. 10 minutes here, 15 minutes there, 2 minutes here, maybe 20, whatever, right? What happens after 6 months? Okay. Both students can honestly say, I've been training here for 6 months. Both can say, I attend class twice a week. Right? Both have been exposed to the same curriculum, but have they accumulated the same practice time? Not even close. Okay. Let's do the math conceptually, right? Student B has essentially whatever repetitions occurred during formal class. Student A has those same reps plus hundreds or potentially thousands of additional attempts or actual correct repetitions. Okay. And those attempts have another benefit. Okay. Student A goes back to Thursday lesson carrying questions because inevitably they're going to come up because they're going to be trying to do something and their balance keeps going off at a certain point, or they tried speeding things up and they, something locked up along the way, whatever. Right. But either way, right. They come back with questions. Right? Okay. I don't know what it might sound like. Right. I don't know. Since when I was in class, this past Monday, right, I noticed that when I moved this foot first, right, or maybe it wasn't Monday, maybe we're talking about practice. So maybe when I practiced this on Tuesday, right, I noticed when I move this foot first, right, my weight gets stuck here, right, or I can't move my foot quickly, right. What am I missing, right? Am I doing something wrong? Okay. And yeah, if we look at what just happened, right? The student's practice has actually made the next class more valuable, right? Not even just to him, because he asked that in class, and the teacher's going to make that adjustment. So even if it was a private one-on-one off to the side, other students have the opportunity to see since they go, okay, so let's fix this thing or whatever. If they're actually paying attention and recognizing that any correction in class is applicable to anybody who's having the same problem, then they will take note, right? Not just when the correction is for them, but I'm not here to tell anybody how to think, right? So the student just made the class more valuable, right? Because he or she is no longer coming back merely waiting for the next technique or the next piece of information, right? During practice, he encountered a problem. He investigated it, tried to solve it for himself, right? Kind of tried to work it out, right? He's bringing the results of that investigation, that study, right? That exploration back to the teacher. And now the teacher and the student have something much more useful to work with. Okay? So anyway, you know what? I'm going to throw this at James because he's on. Actually, Chris McLaurin is on. He's our Born Divine guy. They're both instructors, right? So you guys have been teaching long enough, right, to have seen this. Have you noticed the difference between students who essentially only touch the material, right, touch the lessons and whatnot, right, while they're in class, and students who clearly come back having worked on something since you last saw them, right? And what differences do you notice? Okay. And again, for everybody that's watching, right, this is not about guilt, right? Not asking how many hours you should be practicing, right? I'm asking you to observe the relationship, right? If two students receive the same lesson, but one student works with that lesson for another hour during the week, should we actually expect the same developmental result from both of them? Right? Of course not. And yet martial arts students frequently compare themselves based on what? We've both been training for 3 years, right? Why is his rank higher than mine? Or, I don't get it. Like, learn the same stuff, or I'm just never going to get this onikudaki or whatever. Maybe, right? And even the time-wise thing, right? That's calendar time. Okay, calendar time doesn't tell me what either of you, student A or student B, right, actually did during those 3 years or 6 months or whatever. Okay? Anyway, James, back to you. You've taught. Have you seen like what stands out as differences when when you can actually see that somebody's practiced?
Physically, I'd say just almost a comfortability in the movement. It's not so, it doesn't have that. I'm trying to figure out the mechanics of it, roboticness kind of to it. You can see it in their face when they're trying to left brain their way through it.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't know that from experience or anything, but but
You've gotten
just
way
pragmatic.
better at that stuff, right?
But it's that, and if they have questions, like they're way more nuanced about a specific little tweak that's needed, or it's a very specific question and not just a very like wide open generic
Yeah.
question. As in, like, this
you
doesn't
point
work.
out, or you point out to somebody, like we did that back in like mod 2 or mod 3 or whatever, right? We
Sure.
did this thing, right? And they might go, yeah, I remember that, right? Or they'll go, I don't think I saw that more than like 2 or 3 times. Okay. How do you think you would have remembered that more?
Yeah.
Right? Now you've been to Japan, but other people that have been to Japan or that maybe you've watched some of the pirated videos and stuff of training classes from Japan that's on YouTube and whatnot, right?
Mhm.
Take a moment and stop watching. I mean, I know you've seen these things, right? But take a moment and stop watching the trained monkey, right? Hatsumi Sensei doing the cool moves, right? That everybody applauds for. I'm not calling him a monkey. I'm talking about people's perceptions, right? Stop looking for the next technique or the next cool move, and take a moment, especially if it's one of these things. It's not a clip, right? It's a class, right? And pay attention to how long he gives people to practice before calling them back in again, or how many variations he does before he says, okay, go play. Mother trucker. I'm just like, sometimes we're lucky if we had like 30 seconds each, maybe, right? And next thing you know, we're being called back so you could show the next thing, right? What repetitions, right? So we went through an hour and a half class. Maybe there was a 20, 40, whatever minute break so he could do calligraphy, or maybe there wasn't, or whatever, right? But how many times did we actually go through the same thing? Just watch one of those freaking videos, right? Where they're at Ayase or even at Hombu or whatever. It's an actual freaking class. And not the ones that are edited, right? Where it just jumps to the next thing or whatever. Just watch how long. Sometimes it's 2 to 3 minutes. People are going back and forth. You try it, I try it, whatever, right? But how many repetitions of each technique or each variation are those people actually getting in class, right? But again, but you're right. There's definitely there's a greater sense of comfort,
Mhm.
even if what they practiced, it's better, but it's still glitched, or it's still like you're still doing that thing there, right? They go, oh, no, I'm not looking for you to solve for X, Y, and Z in between this and the last class, right? Just get better at one of those things. Okay, cool. That tells me that you're doing targeted work, right? But you're right. There's a just that relaxed kind of thing. It's like the difference between watching a new, like a teenager who's just starting the on the road practice driving a car, right? Or even the one who just got their license, right? And then somebody who's been driving for like 20 years, 30 years, right? Just their whole body language is completely different, right? It's absolutely the same. And the questions, absolutely the questions. Holy shit. The type of questions, and they might not even say things like, I was just working on this, but they might just say, I'm having a trouble like understanding this part here. Like, am I supposed to put my feet like this far apart or whatever, right? Or I can ask a question. Okay, like, what's your lead leg supposed to be able to do from that kamae? Like if somebody swings a baseball bat at it or whatever, right? Okay. So what's getting better? You can see it, right? You can physically see somebody getting better and their level of understanding. And then the other big thing that happens, maybe you've noticed this, is you'll look over and the student is explaining it to their partner
Mhm.
or a junior or whatever. And they're explaining it while they're doing it, right? So it's not like they know it theoretically and they're just repeating what the teacher said, right? But they're like helping the person move and stuff, and like, see, if you do it over here, right, you can do it, but you have to reach farther, whatever, right? You catch them doing things like that too, and it matches, right? Have you ever been to a class remember being in one in, well, a bunch of different places, but I remember being in one in Texas one time where what they were describing, what they were saying they were doing, like I found no fault with it, right? The principles are correct, timing, distancing, angling, that kind of thing. But their stylized body movement, it wasn't Bujinkan, Ninjutsu, or whatever. I don't even remember what they were doing, but just I was there as a guest instructor teaching a Ninjutsu segment with another person from the Bujinkan, and he nudges me at one point and he goes, "Do they have any idea that they're not doing what they say they're doing?" And I just looked over and went, "Shh, they're teaching." Right? I just no. So, but again, right, there's a big difference. Did Chris pop anything in there about that, or is
No.
no? Okay, all right, that's fine. I didn't want to talk to him anyway. So,
And I think the other thing that always comes to mind with things like that is how we talk about the difference between like information, knowledge, and wisdom. And
yeah,
people's like, I know that. I'm like, no, you have the information. You haven't done anything with that to turn it into knowledge yet. You haven't reached that yet.
there's a very big difference between someone who can repeat the lesson back that they heard from their teacher or Hatsumi Sensei in a video or whatever, right? And the body can't write the check that the mouth is writing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And someone who has done it so much that it's now integrated into how they do it, but can't remember the freaking name, right, of the technique, or maybe they can't explain it because they're not, they're not at teacher level or whatever, right? They can do it. It's kind of like the difference between street knowledge and book knowledge, right? They both know about this thing, but one person can produce, right? They can fix a car, motorcycle, whatever, just by listening to it. The other person, right? They can tell you theoretically how that freaking internal combustion engine works and all that kind of stuff, but they've never put in the time to make it work. Yeah. So, and again, when I have people go through the instructor training program, they get some time to explore like the difference between a hobbyist, what I call a recreationalist, and a lifestyle student, right? Because they're not the same. They'll go to the same classes and whatnot, but level of commitment and all kinds of stuff is different, right? I know you've been through the program like twice. So yeah, I mean, the way they relate to training, the way they engage with it, it's very different. And sometimes people would be offended if they knew how we categorize them. But like everybody, nearly everybody, comes to training and they don't mean to. They just come to training with the mindset that we would call a hobbyist, right? This is something that interests them and they'll do it when they have time. Okay. Well, we fix that. And most training groups fix that by having regularly scheduled classes. So now if you want to train in this art, in this system with this group, this is when we train. Okay. That gets a little weirded out especially with my online people. Okay. I have to trust that a lot of people are training and practicing, but because they can do it on their own and they get the recorded material, right? Unless they show up for the live things like the Tuesday and Friday master classes and stuff like that, and they're on the other end on Zoom, like Jeffrey Fletcher is always in uniform, right? He even tells me that when he practices, I used to do the same thing, right? Because as soon as you put that stuff on, you think differently, you act differently, whatever. I'm not saying that people have to. It's just the way I did it. It's the way Jeffrey does it. It's something in the name, although we spell our names differently, right? He's just a weird George. Anyway, so anyway, but when somebody can, find the time, then they train, right? But that's pretty much a hobbyist, right? They like it, they're interested in it, but they do it when they have time, right? Like I like to build models, like scale models, right? I really enjoy doing it. Finding the time to do it, a little on the difficult side. And you know my schedule. You see you're chuckling already, right? That you haven't put a model together in quite a while. And you would be correct, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't enjoy it, right? So, I enjoy camping too. Haven't done that either, that in a while either. So, but then you got this recreationalist kind of mindset, right? Where it's no longer an interest. It's something that they enjoy and they miss it when they're not doing it, right? There's like agitation that goes on, right? It's becoming more a part of like something that is closer to habit. So where a hobbyist has interest and likes doing things, but they do it when they have time, the recreationalist finds time, makes time, right, to do it. Okay. So in my instructor training program, an instructor skill is understanding where a student is and how to inspire or motivate or push the right buttons to get them to move from one mindset to the next mindset. Okay. And while people could look at it and go, well, that's a manipulation thing. You're just trying. No. Somebody's habit patterns have to change. Their vision and their recognition for how this serves them and stuff like that has to change, right? They have to be able to see progress or other things that, again, for them, right? But somebody who's in it for that, that's just, when I say lifestyle, I mean, like they're living and thinking like a ninja all the time, although that's, I guess it could be part of it. What I mean is they can't not do it, right? Conversations suddenly get related to lessons. They don't have to be in the dojo to be discussing it. They find themselves like they could be sitting around listening to a conversation, stretching their wrist, or you ever drive down the road and the window's down or whatever, and you stick your hand out the window and you feel the air and stuff like that, right? I used to use that to practice doing shto, right? When the wife was driving or whatever, right? Because if I did it incorrectly, my hand got whipped around by the wind. But if I did it correctly, then it was, just like same thing in a pool, doing the thing or the strike in the water, so that it glides through as opposed to getting this resistance kind of thing, right? So those people are doing it all the time, right? They can't not do it, right? They're even worse. Like if dojo was closed, right, for 6 months or 6 weeks, and we did everything we could to get classes back up and running, right, after that fire in that plaza where we were a year ago. And people were like calling up their training partners or whatever and meeting outside of class, or they were like, hey, is there anything that I can do to help so we can get things going, back in place? Or we were working in the dojo, and next thing you know, we're on a break or whatever, and people are like, hey, like, grab me, I want to try this, right? That's very, very different, right? That's a whole different mindset where they can't not do it, right? And this isn't an implication or a guilt trip for anybody being anywhere. This is part of an instructor's or a teacher's skill set to be able to move someone, right? The person comes in maybe, right, wanting to, and sometimes people don't come in the hobbyist mindset. Sometimes they come in as the recreationalist. Sometimes they do come in already. So, okay, I don't need to move anybody, but it's a skill to be able to help somebody see greater value to where they change the way they operate in regards to that particular thing. And in this case, it's Ninjutsu or martial arts, self-defense, whatever, right? Because it's one thing to want to do it. It's one thing to enjoy doing it, but it's something else altogether in how one engages with it. Yeah. So, anyway, cool beans. Anything from Chris before I jump back in? No. All right.
No, sir.
Okay. Let's get back to that phrase. I am disciplined. Right. So now let's take a look at this a little bit deeper. I think, right. I think it's very easy to interpret discipline in the way that we might have seen, our parents doing it, right? Discipline as punishment, or discipline as force, right? In the military, right? Those kind of things, right? Where even if we're applying it to ourselves, right? It's easy to interpret discipline as I make myself go to class. Okay. And again, showing up matters. Okay. If I'm exhausted, I make myself get off my ass and go. Okay. But if I only work when the teacher has scheduled and put together a class, if I only do the work when the teacher has created the lesson, when they've provided me with a training partner, how convenient. Thank you, Sensei. Right. When they've told me what to do, right? Told me how many repetitions, or, we're going to work on this for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever. Right. And then they told me when I was done, right? When I was finished. Right. And then what we're going to work on next. Right. How much of that process is actually self-discipline? Okay. And I get it, right? I get it. That's an uncomfortable question, because at that point, a lot of the discipline belongs to the structure that's surrounding me, right? The class is at 7, so I arrive at 7, or I arrive at 6:45, whatever, right? Sensei says work on this, so I work on this. Sensei says switch sides, so I switch sides. Sensei says stop, so I stop. It's like it's like what's that old game, James? Simon Says. That's it, right? Okay. That's compliance. That's not discipline. That's obedience or compliance with the structure. Okay. Useful, right? Necessary sometimes. But discipline begins becoming something different when, in this case, Tuesday shows up. Remember, classes were Monday and Thursday, right? So Tuesday shows up, right? Because then nobody's watching. Nobody's taking attendance. Nobody will know if I don't do it, right? There isn't a belt test tomorrow. Oh, that really motivates people to practice, doesn't it? How about it, James? That really motivates people, right? Whatever, right? If you're involved in a sport kind of thing, right? There isn't a tournament on Saturday, whatever, okay? And I decide I'm going to work on that footwork for 15 minutes because this is a capability I said I wanted. It's a capability I need, right, to be able to do my stuff that I'm learning now better. It's a capability I'm certainly going to need farther down when things get more complex, right? Now, Now we're getting closer to what I mean by I am disciplined, right? The goal belongs to me. Therefore, some responsibility for the work must belong to me as well. As a matter of fact, the way my teachers explained it, about 80 or 90% of that belongs to me. Okay? Training in a dojo is best. As long as you're getting feedback from your teacher, and there is something to say about physical proximity. I'll talk about that here in a little while. Because me and most of my peers, we didn't attend formal class every week. Okay. But now, right, after having said all of these things, right, I can already hear an objection, right? Okay, sensei, right? That's fine for punches. That's fine for kamae. That's fine for footwork, right? I can do those by myself. But this is ninjutsu. We work with partners, right? There are throws and locks and attacks and timing and distance and lions and tigers and bears. Anyway, right? What exactly am I supposed to practice by myself, right? Or maybe even a deeper question, how can I possibly develop if my teacher isn't physically standing there watching me? That belief doesn't only affect distance students, right? I think it may be one of those subtle things affecting local students too. Okay? Because once you believe meaningful martial arts practice requires the teacher to be present, okay, then even if the teacher lives 10 minutes away, okay, that belief just gave yourself permission, right? You just gave yourself a reason to not practice until the next class. Okay? That's where I want to go next. Because the idea that long distance training doesn't work, right? The idea that you can't practice without a partner, right? And the idea that the teacher has to continually supervise development may all be different expressions of the same underlying misunderstanding. Okay? And once we examine the history of how many of us actually learned this art, that assumption becomes very difficult to keep up. Very difficult. Okay. James, any questions, comments? Take a little comment break here.
No, sir.
No? All right. Well, I'm going to take a drink break. All right. So let's deal with that objection. Okay? Because I've heard versions of this for years. You can't really learn martial arts long distance, or you can't learn ninjutsu unless you're physically training with your teacher all the time. And usually the reasoning is pretty straightforward, right? The teacher needs to be there. The teacher needs to see what you're doing. Somebody needs to correct you. And at first glance, that sounds perfectly reasonable. In fact, I agree with part of it, right? You do need feedback. You need correction. You need somebody who knows more than you do to look at what you're doing and tell you, yes, that's right. No, that's not quite what we're doing. Or you're missing this, or I don't know, you're compensating that, whatever, right? And sometimes, that's it. Good. Okay. Right. Stop changing it. That's it. Okay. Sometimes, right? Anyway, the point is those things matter, right? They do matter, right? But notice the leap that often happens in the argument. We go from a student needs access to qualified instruction and feedback to, therefore, the teacher must be physically present whenever meaningful practice occurs. Those are, they're not only not the same statement, they don't even point to the same thing. Okay. And if the second one were true, right? A teacher has to be physically present, right? Make sure I get it right. Then I don't know how a large percentage of the senior Western practitioners in this art ever got where we are. Because that's not how many of us trained. Right? That's not what training actually looked like for a really large percentage of us. Right? I think people sometimes look backward at senior practitioners and they, I don't know, unconsciously maybe imagine that we had access to some kind of training environment that didn't actually exist. Right? And I know I hear it all the time, right? James has seen the emails and stuff. You understand, Sensei? It's different for you. No. Okay. And I hear that from people that live in my own local area. And where regardless of where that local area was. Okay. So, I mean, that belief, it comes from a place where it's as though everybody, like all of us, we were living 15 minutes away from our teacher, right? We're going to class 3 or 4 nights a week, right? We were getting constant and continual hands-on correction from the highest level teachers in the art. No, right? When I started training in this art, there were 3 Western black belts that I knew of. I didn't know about Doron Navon in the Middle East, in Israel. But in the United States, there were 3. 2 of them were students of the one, right? There was Stephen Hayes, there was Bud Malmstrom, and there was Jack Oben. One lived near Dayton, Ohio. One lived just outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And most people know Jack Oben from the East Coast, like New Jersey, Red Bank, New Jersey. Yeah, no. Then it was he was in California. Stockton? Maybe. Either way, California. Okay. And by the way, I was stationed with the U.S. Army in either South Korea or for a time I was in North Carolina. And for 3 years I was in what was then West Germany. So what? Anyway, but the reality is that for most of us, right, for many of us anyway, right, direct access to our teachers happened in what I might call chunks, right? Could be a weekend, could be a week, right? Whatever. Closest that Stephen Hayes was ever near me as a student when I was still in the military was my friend and peer, Bryn Morgan, who lived in Liverpool, England, would host seminars, bring him there. And I and a couple of my students would hop in a car and drive up through West Germany and then through the Netherlands and up into Belgium. And we would take a ferry across the English Channel to Dover and then drive all night up until we got to this boys camp where these things were taking place. So we could train for the weekend, turn around, drive back and take the ferry back and all that stuff. So it was fun. The closest I've ever been to Shoshi Malmstrom when I trained with him was when he stayed at my house, because I was in the military in West Germany and I hosted the seminars and flew him to train everybody else. Or here, I brought him here a couple of times and he taught at the dojo. Yeah, closest I've ever been to Hatsumi Sensei. Right now, this is as close as I've ever gotten. I take that back. When I was stationed in South Korea, right, I was that far away from Japan compared to where I am now. But I pretty much had the same kind of defeatist mindset or whatever that I had to get over, that I hear from a lot of folks. So when people tell me that I don't understand, I do. And I had to take the lessons to heart, and I had to do what needed to be done to make myself, my life, my decisions, and all those kind of things more in line with what this art is supposed to turn us into. So, but anyway, right? For many of us, right? The training happened in chunks, right? You might train with a Western teacher, right? You might travel to train with somebody like Stephen Hayes, Jack Hoban, Bud Malmstrom, another senior instructor, whatever, right? We might attend a seminar. We might attend a Taikai when Hatsumi Sensei, Japanese master teachers came to our country, somebody else's country, whatever, right? Attending a Daikomyosai. You might save money, right? You might make arrangements. You might travel to Japan, train intensively while you were there. And then what? Well, then what? The then what is you went home. The teacher didn't climb into your suitcase. Okay. Can you imagine? Right. Anyway, right. You didn't bring Hatsumi Sensei home with you. Okay. You didn't bring Stephen Hayes home with you. Stephen Hayes is tall. I'm not, that's a steamer trunk right there. Right. And you had whatever notes you had taken, whatever you remembered, whatever you felt, whatever corrections you got while you were there. Right. Whatever questions you got answered, whatever new questions had been come up, right, during that experience by other people, whatever, right? And then you had months of work ahead of you, sometimes a year, right? There's one point during my military service, I went a year and a half between training before I saw my teacher again. Okay. So what were we supposed to do? Sit down and wait? Okay. Well, guess I can't practice until next year's Taikai. Okay. Yeah, no, not an option. Okay. That gap was where just a tremendous amount of the development happened. First time I saw it happening, and I'm just, I'm lamenting, I'm in the military and whatnot. And so I'm putting training groups together. I'm talking to other military policemen and whatnot. Hey, you want to train? Whatever. I'm trying to get time in. When I couldn't get that, then I'm rolling on my own, leaping on my own, climbing. I'm doing the kata by myself, whatever. We're kind of talking about some of this stuff later, but I finally, able to make it to a seminar, right? So I go to a little place outside of Dayton where there was this camp where they would rent the thing it was a long weekend kind of thing that we did back when the Shadows Vegan Ninja Festivals were there. And they were doing these, everybody put together a demonstration to show your skills. And I was just, here's what I've been working on, right? And I figure I'm a ninth Q. I'm not very high, right? Ninth Q, I'm going for eighth Q. And next thing I know, I'm promoted to sixth Q. Well, it had been months, right? 6 to 9 months, maybe even a year since the last teacher contact and whatnot. And that happened quite often. Okay. Go for the next rank and jump over a bunch of ranks and whatnot. I didn't know more than anybody else. But I practiced my ass off with the stuff that I had learned in between that period. Most of that was me. And we didn't have Zoom calls. We didn't have, right? This is the old man talking now, right? We didn't have Zoom call. Back in my day, we didn't, right? Sometimes it was a matter of freaking opening a book that had static pictures, looking in a mirror, and getting yourself, and then reading the description about how to get from point A to point B, and then working that out for ourselves. Okay, I'm supposed to be able to move, and then if something changes or somebody comes in from a different direction, I need to be able, right? And picking up the speed and adding pressure and intermittent training partners here or there. Okay? But the point here is that the seminar wasn't the end of the lesson. Okay, I think this connects directly to what we're just talking about with school, right? You attended the seminar, you received the lesson, then you went home and started working on it. Okay, in school, the teacher gave you homework. Practice outside of class. Okay? I don't use the term homework if it makes you like want to throw up like you did in high school. Okay? But that's what it is. The problem was that for most of us, teachers didn't explain the purpose of homework. They just gave it. That was a part of your grade. But homework is the practice between lessons so that when we show up for the next class, we're farther ahead and the teacher doesn't have to repeat the lesson. We're ready for the next lesson. We're not ready for the next lesson because we want it. We're ready for the next lesson because our skills, abilities, and capabilities have been upgraded, and now we're ready for the next lesson. It's not the same thing. Okay. So again, you got the lesson, you went home and you started working on it, and maybe you remembered something incorrectly. Okay. Maybe you thought you understood something and you discovered 3 weeks later that you didn't. Okay. Maybe you found a question you didn't even know enough to ask while you were standing in front of the teacher. Okay. That's important. Okay. Because sometimes you can't ask the useful question yet, right? You haven't done enough work. You don't know where the problem is. Okay. During the seminar, everything made sense because the teacher just demonstrated it. Same thing in class, right? They just did it. And then you go home and you try it and wait, how did he get from here to there? Whatever, right? Or why does this feel completely different when I do it now? Like, it didn't feel like this in class. Or I can make it work on Bob, right? But when Jim attacks me, everything falls apart. Okay, good, perfect. Wait, good, perfect. Yeah. It's part of the process. When those things happen, now you're learning something, right? The problem you've encountered isn't evidence that your practice failed. The problem is producing the next question. And then when you see your teacher again, you bring that question with you. Okay? I used to carry a small notebook with me, those little like flippy spiral bound kind of things, right? Sometimes they were little booklet looking kind of things that we military policemen had them as we took little notes and stuff. I had stacks of these things laying around. I used to carry one in my back pocket all the time. Just right. I mean, I don't mean only like when I went to class. I mean, I carried it around. If a question occurred to me, I wrote it down. If I noticed something during practice, I wrote it down, right? If I was just going through my day and something suddenly connected, whatever, right? I had a thought, what if? Hey, what if? Right? And it was connected to something I was studying or just a thought that I wrote it down. Okay. Sometimes those notes were things that I wanted to research. Right? Sometimes they were insights I wanted to test. Sometimes there were questions I wanted to take back to my teacher the next time I had access to them. As a matter of fact, every time I was prepping, packing and all that kind of stuff to go to a seminar or whatever it was, right? The week or so leading up to it, I pull this notebook out and I think about, or because I was a training group leader, right? To get bodies, I didn't like lament like there's no training group around here, right? My teacher told me I needed bodies. They said set up a training group. Yeah, but I'm only a white belt. Yeah, well, you know more than the people that are going to be coming to you about this stuff, and you're going to keep growing ahead of them. So, whatever. Okay. But if a student asks a question, or a fellow training partner ask a question. We'd work out the answer in class, and then I'd write it out. Because that way, when I went to see my teacher, if my teacher answered the question and said, no, I understand how you got there, exactly how we would do that, principles, concepts, or whatever. It obviously worked, but here's that thing. Okay, cool, win, right? We worked it out in class and it was a solution, but here's this thing. But I'm going to take that correction back, right? And dude, this will make it better. Cool, right? But usually it was, yeah, that'll work. But try this one. And here's a variation of that. So it was always like a win-win kind of thing, right? And at the time, I thought of that mostly as my own little private, right, practical system, right? What it really came down to was I don't want to forget my questions. I don't want to forget these insights, right? I don't want to leave things to memory and then life or job or whatever get busy and then shit, I forgot later. Okay? Because you know how that works, right? You got 17 questions when you're driving home. Then 6 months later, you're standing in front of the person who can answer them, and they go, "You have any questions?" And your brain goes, "Nope, nothing." Right? Or there's that cricket or the deer in the headlights look, or shit, I had them, whatever. Right? So I didn't want that to happen, so I wrote them down. But I have come to understand something differently right now. Right? I mean, I've been teaching for decades myself, right? But I can look backward and see that the notebook was actually doing something else, right? Again, remember, I was writing this stuff down for me. Study, research, try this in class, or try this next time you get with your training partner, that kind of thing, right? Questions to ask sensei, right? But that notebook was actually doing something else. Because when I showed up in front of my teacher with questions that had come out of months, or in the one case, a year and a half, right, of practice, I was showing him evidence of what I had been doing since the last time he saw me. Think about that. I wasn't just answering the question or trying to blow smoke up his ass. Oh, yeah, I've been practicing. Okay? I was showing him evidence. I didn't have to show him the notebook. Just answering the questions. James brought this up earlier, right? That nuance, the nuance in the questions, right? And questions that would have only come out of practice because I learned it one way. And then I was trying these other things, right? People in class last week during Nimpo Masterclass, our Friday Masterclass, right? We're working on one simple point in a technique that we have in Module 2, which is kind of it's like the front end of Koku and Renyo, but we don't quite make it to the kick or the grab or whatever, right? It's just the punch, and then we carry this thing, chop it off, pop them in the face, whatever, right? And we just drilled it down to look at that shuto to the arm. Okay. So what I was trying to show students was a way using the Happo principle, right? 8 directions kind of thing, not just around us, but around anything. So Happo, Kukan, space and whatnot, right? And so the model has us receiving this thing, stepping laterally and going 90 degrees through the arm, right? And that unbalances him in a way, moves the cover so that we can go boom, boom, right into his face. But what we spent time doing was moving the point and doing it laterally through here. Moving the point, doing it laterally through here, right? Then we explored vectors. So instead of doing a 90 degree straight through it, let's do 45 degrees through it that way. Let's do 45 degrees through it that way. So when the thing came in, maybe I was chopping through that way, or it was coming through, chopping back through this way. And then we explored it by going around the arm and looking at what that was producing, right? That's the Kyonapo principle, right? And of course, that's naturally going to produce Henka, but it's producing Henka naturally because of the process, the learning process, and applying the Kyonapo principle, not just randomly inventing arbitrary different moves, right? But anyway, think about that, right? So the quality of the question tells the teacher something, right? If you ask, Sensei, can you show me Omote Gyaku again? Or all you're doing is just bringing questions and they keep getting repeated. Oh, okay. I mean, that's a question, right? It's one kind of question. Okay. But if you were to say, when I've been practicing Omote Gyaku, right? This, for those of you new to this, right? This outside wrist reversal, right? When I'm practicing Omote Gyaku, I notice that if I get to this point here, right, with my weight on this leg, I have to use my arm to kind of hold that position, right? I feel off balance, right? But if my foot is here, his balance seems to go before I feel like I'm actually like applying the lock. Like I don't even get a chance to twist it. It's already going, right? Am I understanding that correctly, or am I creating something that shouldn't be there? Right? That's a very different question, right? That question in and of itself contains evidence of practice. Okay? If a student were to say that to me, it tells me that that student has been working, right? It tells me that they've encountered things along the way during that practice, right? It tells me that they've compared results, right? It tells me that they've formed like a hypothesis, or they've interpreted a certain way or whatever, right? They've come up with some kind of meaning for it, right? And now they're bringing that interpretation or that supposition or whatever back for feedback, for correction, right? As a teacher, oh man, I can work with that, right? And more importantly, I can begin to see how the student's learning. Okay. I can also see other things going on as well. Because the closer to beginner, and when I say beginner, I mean like being introduced to the gyakute, right? Because somebody's not introduced to the gyakute until about 6 months into our curriculum, right? They are doing tehodoki and grab escapes and things like that, but actually maneuvering and affecting his spine and his body and stuff from long distance and whatnot. It's about 7 months in, right? So at that point, they're a beginner. Okay. So maybe they've only seen it once in class. Okay. And, or whatever. Right. And so that's a legitimate question. So I'd say, can you show me Omote Gyaku again? Okay. Because I'm going to look at the belt, look at them. I know my students, I know where they've been, that kind of thing. Right. It's a fair question. Okay. Because they're trying to remember it. They're trying to be able to reproduce the model. Cool. If the person's in, remember that's mod 2, right? So the person's in mod 3, mod 4, they're Shodan, they're coming up on a Shodan test or whatever. Hey, can you show me that again? No. Go talk to a senior or whatever, but seriously? Okay. By that point in time, we have done Omote Gyaku from several start positions, several angles, forward, back, side. We've done Gyoko version, Koto version, Kukishinden version, which is Kotegaish. We've done, seriously? Huh? Now, I want to show him the base model, and I'm having a hard time remembering it. Okay, good context. Okay, here's the base model we tend to start people with. Okay, good. I remember that one. Yeah, okay, good. Okay. Or I want to teach them the basic one, or the standard one. Is it this one or is it that one? It's that one. Okay, cool. Right. just a place to start. Those all make sense because the person's putting it in context. But if someone is missing something in a technique that should be in muscle memory because they learned it 6 months or a year and a half ago or something like that, is not showing up, there's a reason there's an edge to my voice. Okay. So again, when a student comes to me like that, right, I can work with that, right? And more importantly, I can begin to see how that person is learning, right? Because the teacher doesn't just correct technique. Okay? And this is the thing that I think students miss. A good teacher isn't only looking at, can Jeffrey perform the technique? Okay? The teacher is also learning, how does Jeffrey process information? What does he notice? What does he miss? Right? What kinds of mistakes does he repeatedly make? What does he discover on his own? Is he making discoveries on his own? What happens when I don't give him the answer? Okay? Does he investigate? Does he study? Or does he repeatedly keep coming back to me to get definitive answers for stuff that he should be working out on his own? Right? Does he come back with a better question? Okay? That's part of the teacher-student relationship too. And if I never do anything between lessons, right? What am I giving my teacher to evaluate? Okay? Essentially, my ability to follow instructions while the teacher is present. That's useful information. But for my teacher, that's very limited information. Just because I can do what was demonstrated in class doesn't show capacity. It doesn't show commitment, intent, or whatever. Okay, I get it, right? These are the days I show up for class. I'm regular that way or whatever. But if I were my teacher, I might also wonder, maybe it's just habit. Maybe it's just this is their hobby. Maybe it's just, they're getting away from the house because they don't like their home life. And this is a much more pleasurable thing to do. I don't know. Okay. But the question has to be in there, like, why are they here? Okay? I mean, yes, they're learning things, but what are they doing with that to convert the learning, the lesson, into something usable? And especially with martial arts. Holy shit, something usable when shit goes sideways. Anyway, James, anything else pop up? I keep hearing beeps and stuff like that. Oh,
No.
did I lose him?
I still don't see anything.
Nothing. Wow. All right. Again, I've either put them to sleep or I don't know. Right? You have a physically demanding job and stuff. If I haven't put you to sleep, I don't know.
No.
No, we're good.
I haven't.
All right. Anyway. All right. So again, we're drilling down on this stuff, right? Start with curriculum. We have to have good curriculum because, this has to get me where I'm going. This has to give me the kind of skills that, is going to make me capable when the shit hits the fan, right? I need somebody that can convey that in a way that gets it off the frickin' paper into the classroom and in a way that will move me from point to point to point. Because if the teacher's always teaching the same model the same way, regardless of rank level, okay, well, are we just learning this because we're supposed to learn it and that's what the rank is for? Okay. Just recently, Kyle and Alan are on. Which class was that? We just recently did that same technique I was talking about, but we did it. We didn't do it in the same class, right? what we did was, shit, remind me of this. We were working, it was the same technique. We were doing a technique where the punch is coming in, 2 punches, right? And we moved to that 45-degree geometry, right? So we didn't just avoid the first one, fell short as well. And then what did we have? We had, I guess it was just like an Ichimoji no kata kind of thing, right? Coming back in to hit the neck. And I created an oh shit variation, right? Where shot comes in and it was just one of those whoa kind of things, right? Where the hand goes flying over and here's the next punch right in front of you, right? So the next one comes in, we move back, right? Can we see where we're catching it and stuff like that, right? So again, this was for intermediate level people because they had to have learned the technique first, right? And then they learned some variations off of that. But then we're working with drills, right? To make sure that under pressure at speed, when somebody starts throwing a 1-2, I only got time for one step, one position, right? Am I hitting my mark, right? When I don't have time to think about or triangulate my position, right? And then we just kept picking it up to where now the distance is closer and maybe my first move can't be to move to a good 45 where he's going to miss with the second one. He's worked himself into friend range and then pops this thing off and I have time to just clear it. Well, see, now it's looking more fight-like, but are the principles still there, right? This is the capacity and the capability that has to carry over. Right? Otherwise, we'll always be doing the same things the same way and then arguing with everybody else who doesn't do it that way. That's beginner mindset. Okay. Anyway, and here's where I find some of the criticism, right, of modern long distance training, right? I find it interesting, right? Because today we have something me and my peers didn't have. I mentioned this earlier. We didn't have Zoom. We didn't have video calls. We didn't have digital video. Wasn't until like 1986 or so that the first videos came out on VHS. Right? There were 2 within a relatively short amount of time. I think Hayes came out with his first 2. The hell was it called? Ninja Night Warrior, something like that. Volumes 1 and 2. And then Hatsumi Sensei's came out about Togakure Ninjutsu. And one was just a whole bunch of techniques, kunoichi stuff and rolling and stealth and all that. And then the other one, the volume 2, was more of what people now would call the precursor to the final standard version of like the Kyonapo and stuff like that, right? But either way, right? But today, Zoom, video calls, students can send or upload video footage for review. I can watch them move live, right? It's just all kinds of things, right? I can say, no, turn your foot, right? I can say back up. I can say, hey, you're a little tense on that side over there, right? Or, hey, do that again, right? Just change your angle, do that again, turn sideways, whatever, so I can see your alignment, whatever, right? I can see the student. The student can see me, right? We can talk in real time, right? Is that identical to physically being like in the same room? Well, no, right? And I don't pretend that it is, right? There are things that I, as a student, need to feel. There are things as a teacher that I need to feel if I'm working with a student, right? There are things that the student needs to feel from me if we're working together, right? There are things involving pressure, timing, distance, contact, subtle changes in balance, right? And the relationship between 2 bodies, right? That are much easier or sometimes only possible, right? To communicate through physical contact. And I get that. I of course, right? Which is precisely why the coaching programs that I run don't pretend that physical contact with the teacher is not necessary. Okay. Students are still expected to train with me physically, right? They can come here. They can attend a seminar I'm teaching somewhere else, right? They can host me for a seminar where they live, right? But there is still periodic physical contact. The time between those physical meetings may be just longer, right? And that's not some radical new invention created by online martial arts, right? That is, I don't know, that's remarkably similar to how many of us already trained, right? The technology has actually improved one part of the old system. Okay. 30, 40 years ago, if I practiced something incorrectly for 3 months, I might not figure out or be told that I wasn't doing that right until I physically saw my teacher again. Right? Today, Jeffrey, turn your camera on. Okay. We can catch some of those problems during Tuesday night's class, Friday night's class, during a seminar. Okay. So what is the real objection? Right? Because this makes me wonder, right, whether some of the objection to distance training isn't actually about distance. Right? Maybe it's about a deeper assumption. Right? Maybe it's I don't know, centered around like if the teacher isn't physically present, I'm not really training. Right? And if you believe that, distance training isn't your only problem. Okay? Because with the exception of some of the master teachers that are now soke, some have passed away, who were teenagers living in the local area. Since there was a doctor and just had this training group that met, parks or whatever. Most of his students, long distance. Nagato Sensei lives 2 hours away. Kan Sensei, what's he live? 2.5 hours away, different direction. Other ones, 30 minutes to an hour and a half. And these are ones that are teaching at Hombu a couple of times a week. Kan only teaches once a month, but I think maybe 3-4 hours away. It was quite a distance. Right? But again, right? Because that belief follows you home from the local dojo as well. Right? You can live 5 minutes from Sensei, attend class Monday and Thursday, and still do absolutely nothing Tuesday and Wednesday because there's no class. Well, I don't have a training partner. Whatever, right? And now the geographic distance between you and the teacher is 5 miles instead of 500. But developmentally, local students can be doing the exact same thing as long distance students or people that want to train, but distance is the excuse. Okay? Either way, they're waiting for the teacher to create conditions under which they're willing to do the work. When are you going to set up a dojo in my local area? Yeah, I don't know, when hell freezes over. Huh? You got the seed money for me to set things up? Who's going to teach? Who's going to cover classes here so I can come and make things comfortable for you there? Not you guys. Again, you're enlightened. Right? I get it. It's how ego works. But Ninjutsu has been difficult to get for almost 2,000 years. But it's amazing to me how people in today's world want to learn Ninjutsu, but think it should be like a McDonald's drive-up window convenient. Right? And that brings us right back to I am disciplined. Okay. Anyway, James, I got an interesting perspective here because you've seen both sides of this as well, right? What do you think students misunderstand? Are you still on? You're there, right? Sorry, I didn't switch my screen.
Yes.
I hear you. Okay. So, what do you think students must understand about the difference between access to a teacher and dependence on the teacher? Do you understand the question?
I think so.
What do you think most people misunderstand about the difference between access to a teacher and dependence on a teacher? Not that they would use those terms.
Right. I think it's because they're already they basically already. I mean, the term pre-frame comes to mind. Pre-framed to a teacher, especially Western students, a teacher is always in front of you. Even I think even younger ones that might have experienced online classes via COVID and whatnot, still it's like the norm that a teacher needs to be in front of you, and they're somehow lacking uh, something whenever it goes through like an online uh, platform or via anything else. Uh, to me, it's the first thing that comes to mind is like it's just what the quote unquote normal is for everybody. Is that if they're not in front of you for some reason, that somehow diminishes the value of
Hmm.
of the relationship because everybody's just so used to teachers associated with school. You have to go to school and show up, and I think it's a conditioned thing uh, to a large degree.
Yeah,
That's how
there was
it's set up.
something there was something that came up today just before the formal class, and there were two students that were working on stuff together. Okay, that was really cool, right? And unfortunately, I screwed up their process. Take full responsibility for this. Um, so what happened was they were trying to work out a footwork thing. Okay, and it was really simple, right? When we take this step into, let's say, Ichimonji, Seigan, whatever, right? Does the heel go down first? Because I was talking about walking heel to toe, or do the toes go down first? Okay. And they're working, and I can hear it, right? They're, I do this. This seems a little bit difficult. And then I remember this in class, and I remember him saying this, and I don't remember that. And they're working it through, right? And then all of a sudden, because I'm kind of came around the corner because I heard somebody come in or something. Maybe it was one of the youth students, and I was checking the clock, and then all of a sudden, not, excuse me, Sensei, I have a question. What I heard was, does the foot go down heel first or toe first, or something like that, right? And then it dawned on me that, oh, now they're asking me the question. And this isn't right or wrong. It just happened, right? Because I was present. What were they looking for? They were looking for the definitive answer.
Answer.
But when that happened, what stopped happening? The investigation, right? The strategic thinking, the working out, like, and then that's what I did. I just said, well, what happens when you put your heel down first and then your toes, right? Can you move quickly in the opposite direction? Right? Now, when you put the toe down first and then the heel, can you move back in the opposite direction just as quickly? Well, they only did it a time or two because I think ego was trying to sort out whether or not I gave him the answer. But what I was really doing was asking the questions necessary for them to get back to, right? Okay, let me try this. Heel, toe, toe, heel. That locks up my hip a little bit. The other one, do you know what I mean? To work out the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is a holdover to earlier conditioning.
Yeah.
Right? Because a teacher, like grade school or just any Western school, right? The teacher is always grading your work. They're always telling you whether you're right or wrong, right? The one thing we don't get often, and if you ever got it in school, you are extremely, extremely lucky, is the ability to fail, make adjustments, and keep on going, right? And getting graded for your ability to go from a failure or a mistake or a glitch and come up with the right answer. Because that's critical thinking. That's strategic thinking. But usually that's not the way it works, right? You're graded, right or wrong, ding, right? And I think a lot of that stuff gets carried over into things. Also, what else happens in school? Inevitably a hand goes up, right? Is this on the test? So what is that question really asking? Not is it on the test? It's really asking, do I need to pay attention to this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, Ninjutsu, Budo is life. And everything in life is a fucking test. It's a test of our confidence. It's a test of our resilience. It's a test of our commitment. It's a test of our level of responsibility. It's a test of our problem-solving abilities. Everything's a test. I had a teacher tell me that once. In this art. Okay? It's all a test. You don't need a belt test to come around to be tested. But see, as soon as I say test to Westerners, they think of something they have to prepare for. Yeah. Every time we go to class, every time we make a decision, every time we practice, we are preparing for the only test that ever freaking matters. And that's when the bad guy shows up. So, unless he calls you up and goes, hey, Tuesday at 4, I'm going to show up at your house. You don't have prep time other than that's what, see, training is prep time. Yeah. So anyway, so let me throw another question to everybody, right? That's on live or watching or whatever, right? How long is too long between lessons if the student is actually practicing? How long is too long between lessons, between classes, if the student is actually practicing? A week? 2 weeks? A month? And before you answer, think carefully. Because if your answer is, well, after a week, they might start making mistakes. Okay. What do you think happens to the student who attends twice a week and does nothing between classes? Physical proximity does not magically create development. And anybody that's ever tried to take a school book and put it under your goddamn pillow at night, hoping that it would magically go from the book into your brain to prep for the test or the classes or whatever, knows that shit don't work. I don't know if you guys have ever seen that stuff, because apparently, like, the modern stuff is all like, way funnier or whatever. But when I was growing up, that was stuff that would show up in freaking sitcoms all the time. Like, I didn't sleep well last night. Are you okay? Yeah, my book's just not very comfortable. So just anyway, right? So what we're really talking about, in between what I was talking about with James and what that was, it's access matters, but dependency is different. Okay. And I want to be careful here, because I don't want anybody turning this into Sensei says you don't need a teacher. Right? That would be ridiculous. Although there are a lot of people in the martial arts or training in the martial arts who believe that they do not need one. They can just learn everything they need from video, DVDs, YouTube, whatever. Okay. But again, I'm not saying that people don't need teachers, right? I have teachers. I've spent my life seeking out people who knew things that I didn't know. Right? The issue isn't whether the teacher matters. The issue is, what is the teacher's job? And what is the student's job? If I hire a strength coach, the coach can design the program. The coach can teach me how to lift, how to do a specific lift, right? The coach can correct my form. The coach can adjust the program. But if the program says I need 3 workouts this week, the coach cannot become stronger for me. Right? If I hire a piano teacher, same thing. Teacher can show me fingering, correct timing. They can explain the music, right? But if I touch the piano only during my 30-minute lesson every Thursday, what should I reasonably expect? All right? And yet martial arts somehow gets treated differently. We sometimes act as though attendance itself should produce mastery. It doesn't. Attendance creates access to the lesson. What you do with the lesson produces development. And I am here to tell you that in the realm of human performance and development and all this science stuff, the number of reps done or the number of times practicing a given technique in class isn't enough for the brain to build new neural pathways, for muscle memory to form. Nothing. Okay. And there's a, I pulled this, it's probably buried at this point because I've got too many projects going on in the workbook, right? One of the requirements, do I have it right here? I do have it right here. One of the student requirements at every level. At every level. I know, I wrote it. Okay. Module 2, intermediate students are expected to. James, is that showing up on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. People can read that, right? Train 2 days per week. Make up all missed classes before review week. Practice at least 15 minutes each day. I don't give a shit if it's 10 minutes one day, 5 minutes another day. But what I do know is if people take 30 seconds here or 3 minutes there, whatever between things, they'll have way more than 15 minutes every day, right? Attend all belt testing on schedule, be a member, right? So it's because those things are requisites for advancement, not just belt testing advancement. It's that practice 15 minutes a day is a joke. I mean, it's not a joke, but it's a bare minimum because human development specialists have already shown that, and this works just as much with the brain as it does with muscle memory or muscle. Okay. If you work out and then you skip a day, the body's going to treat that as a recovery day because it needs to put muscle back because you just broke stuff down. But if you skip another day, the body kind of gets the message that was a one-off kind of thing, right? So you can't skip more than a day before things reset, right? And if you go 2 to 3 days, right, whatever improvements you've been making, let's say you worked out, you had one off day during the week, you did upper body, lower body, total body, whatever, right? You take off a day. And so you're making all these strides, right? If you take off 3 days in a row, you'll have lost 25% of your gain. But the brain works that way too. Okay. So we need to do it until it starts just happening. You don't have to think about it. Right? But again, martial arts somehow gets treated differently. Okay. So anyway, right? Objection and whatnot. But anyway, I'm going to skip over some stuff here. We've already talked about not having people to practice with. You could form a training group. What I want to do is I'm going to skip through my notes here too. James, any questions come up? I want to get to different ways to practice.
No questions, but Kyle had a response to your question.
Okay.
He said, I don't think that there's an objective answer to that. I would say, quote, too long is when what the student is practicing is doing more harm than good, but I'm not sure that the student is able to recognize that happening.
Which one are we talking about? Which question?
How long is too long between lessons?
Okay, so here's the thing. I've already pointed out time periods between lessons with my teacher because we didn't have the video stuff until 86, 87. Okay. And then it's just the same lessons, right? So until I go see my teacher again or something new comes out, there are no new lessons, right? People are swimming in lessons these days. But how long between classes is too long? Here's an answer. The newer somebody is, the more often they need to come to class. So one of the established things we have for Mod 1 people is they must attend class minimum of twice a week. It's even in the Mod 2 thing, right? Because, and the classes, we highly recommend the classes are not back-to-back or like Thursday and Saturday. Because the reason for that is that at that stage, the student hasn't developed the habit of practicing. And so now they're going to go from Saturday after class all the way back again till Thursday, and the brain and the body wiring will not hold on to that stuff. They will literally be starting again. They will remember doing it, but the body won't remember doing it. And the brain certainly isn't doing it often enough to wire things. The higher somebody goes, the more techniques they will have learned, the more drills they have, the more their own ingenuity will be coming up with things and whatnot, right? Literally, the longer they can go between one time seeing their teacher and another time seeing their teacher. When was the last time that I saw Shrey Sensei, Nagato Sensei, trained with, I don't think I've trained with Khan in a long time. Who else? Noguchi Sensei, right? We were just in Japan in May, right? How long since I've been in the presence of one of those teachers? Okay. I have to remember, was I at something where I saw another teacher? Nope. Okay. 2019. Think I've had anything to work on? Think I've worked on anything? Think I've improved? Okay. Because I don't have a redundancy problem. I don't have the same techniques to work on over and over again. Although, if you came and helped me practice for 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, don't be surprised if I'm not working on the same 1 to 3 little things, like a timing thing or a positioning thing or whatever. That's why I can't keep training partners, because they think they're getting all the cool moves that Sensei knows. And Sensei just spent 30 minutes on a freaking, like a footwork timing thing. And all I did was throw different types of punches so he could check these things, or he did it with his eyes closed or whatever. Yeah. I don't have a shortage of material. Okay? But I'm also working on things at a different level. And I don't mean a level of advancement. I mean level of fine tuning. Right? So I understand where you're coming from, but I've already pointed out that it's been upwards of, when I was with Stephen Hayes, a year and a half because of military duty and stuff like that between seeing him, right? This last time with going to Japan, it used to be like if I skipped a year, that was rough enough, right? But about every year, year and a half, give or take, right, to Japan, or to a seminar that was here or close enough that I could get to with somebody higher up and whatnot that I could train with, right? But this last time, because of COVID and all that kind of crap, right? Yeah. So what are we looking at? 19 to 2025. That was a big gap, and yet, okay. So it's not the time between the classes, is what you're doing with the time between classes. Okay. So there's lots of things that we could discuss as far as like different types of practice, or not what different things can do for us and all that. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to toss out a couple of things, right? Because ego gets bored really, really quickly. Okay, and so we could practice the same thing over and over again, and count that as practice. And it's not that it's not, okay, but we'll eventually grow tired and bored, or assume that we have it, right? And so there's a thing called disguising repetition. Like if I sat down with, let's say, Senundo, right, which is, it's not just the zigzag thing from Mod 2, right? It's Kamae to Kamae transition without losing the three primary benefits of Kamae: guard, freedom of movement, right, and stability. Okay, which sounds like a contradiction, but it's not. Okay, and my assignment was, your assignment can be, write down 5 different ways to practice Senundo. So if I can only come up with 2, well, then I might go ask Sensei. Or I might go online and look up to see, like, anybody have any drills for, like, doing Kamae to Kamae movement, Kamae to Kamae evasion, and practicing those kind of things, right? But if I can come up with 5 of those and I rotate them, I'm always working on Senundo, but not always working on it the same way. So now it always feels different. And so I've handled that little problem, right? There's all kinds of different ways to come up with these things, okay? But let's say I'm doing kata training. Well, I can't do kata training in Ninjutsu because kata always have 2 people, except for Sanshin. And well, no, Sanshin can have 2 people too, right? But I don't have a second person. So what are some ways that I can do kata training? And if we come up with the answer of I can't, well, then you got a problem, okay? Because now we're not applying. And Hatsumi Sensei said, the ability of one to apply their ingenuity and the level to which they apply their ingenuity will make a huge difference between how far that person can go in their training. Okay, so I could just practice the defender side and pretend there's an attacker in front of me and just do that part. I could also practice the attacker's side, punch and move like the uke, and he was doing it to me to understand, okay, well, what if he moved my arm over here? Oh, nope, that allows me to step. Okay, what if he moved my arm that way? Shit, now I can't step at all. Okay, those kind of things, right? So now I can put that back into other stuff. So when I have a partner nearby, okay, don't move his arm that way, he can step. Well, Kenny, let's check this. Bob, throw this. I'm going to move your arm like that. Oh, shit, you can step. Okay, so, right, if you can step, right? So I move over here, okay? So, but again, I can do the attacker side. I can do the defender side. I can do slow motion, right? I can do it at what I call Tai Chi speed, right? And I want to move as slowly as possible, right? So that momentum can't hide my mistakes. That speed, and try that with rolling sometime, right? I used to make my students do slow motion rolling races where they could not stop. They had to stay in motion, but the last person to the other end of the room was the winner. And if they stopped or they sped up, either way, I yelled at them, right? Because somebody could cheat, right? They can just like pause so that people got ahead. No. You have to stay in motion. I want to see how slowly you can roll your body over, because rolling is an exercise in balance control, not an exercise in agility. The better your balance control, the more agile you will be, right? So, but again, right, it could be walking, rolling, leaping, climbing, whatever, okay? We could do target work, right? We could just put up a target, work on different strikes, right? A pad, a bag, a makiwara, whatever, right? Because striking the air teaches certain things, right? You don't have resistance to worry about, that kind of thing, right? Which is fine, right? You could just do that, okay? Because now we're working on balance, we're working on focusing on limb extension, those kind of things, right? So it teaches something, right? But it does not teach everything contact teaches, okay? If anybody thinks that, well, say, I mean, I need my partner because I need contact and stuff. You're not practicing contact with a partner. I mean, you are to a slight extent, right? But at training speed, yeah, no, you're not. Okay? You need something that you can develop bone shattering, bone jarring strikes with bite, right? And when you're working with something that's an immovable target, whether it's a tree or a brick wall, and you got this target hanging on or whatever, right? The target gives you feedback. Okay. You learn very, very quickly, right? Did my wrist collapse? Did my structure survive contact? Right? Were you actually at the distance you thought you were? Right? Did I make contact at 2/3 or 3/4 extended, or did I overreach it so that diminished power? Did I underreach so there was blowback that diminished power? Right? That kind of thing, right? All that kind of stuff, right? There's shadow boxing kind of stuff, just kind of moving around, right? Just free movement and stuff, right? And I don't mean that we're turning ninjutsu into boxing, right? I'm talking about the practice method. Okay, you move against an imaginary opponent, you visualize distance, you visualize attack lines, move, shift, that kind of stuff, and you're just putting things together, right? This is one of the keys to being able to string your basics together in an unbroken flow because you're just moving, right? You could just do it with kamae, right? Just moving, and I'm staying behind the guard, so one moves into another, right? So so I'm not going ka-chink, ka-chink, right? One kamae, another kamae, right? Just because I need to keep that between me and him, no matter where he goes, okay? And if he shifts over here, well, that's fine. I can go that far, or I could just let this happen. So as he's looking for a good way in, his brain's focusing on this kamae that I'm in, right? And he's looking for a way in for this one, okay? But if all of a sudden it shifts, right? Shit, right? Now he's got to start all over again. Or if it shifts into a different thing and then it shifts into a different, right? So we can be playing around with these things, right? But the other thing too is that there's nothing to stop us from talking to a friend in class to make arrangements to train or practice outside of class. Okay? So we could have partner training, right? As I said, my teachers told me, look, you need bodies. Okay. So you put an ad in a free classified or something where you're looking for training partners or hang up flyers or something. You just don't need to be gooper or whatever, right? Well, sensei, I'm only a white belt or I'm only this rank or whatever, not really qualified to teach. Okay, then don't. Okay. I'm a group leader of a new group. And so I'm under this teacher and my teacher gives us stuff to work on and whatnot. And so this week we're working on this. Great. You're just the group leader. Okay. So we're all just here to experiment and that kind of stuff. Right. That's how I started. Right. I was very, very clear letting people know, look, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a black belt. Here's what I'm working on. And so, I'm offering to help people learn things to get to a certain level so that they can help me practice and whatnot. And here's what we're doing. So I started my training groups. I didn't present myself as some grand poobah or whatever. Okay? But again, we could be doing body movement, right? There's plenty of stuff, right? Striking, body movement, all kinds of stuff, right? And then there's the big thing I think people miss, right? I was taught that the dojo is like the classroom. And everything outside the dojo walls is the laboratory. Okay? So, again, we've got kata practice. We got all these kind of things that we could do alone or with somebody, right? But then there's ordinary life. One of the most magical things I think I was ever taught was how to turn ordinary life into my own personal practice dojo. Okay? And this is where practice can become way bigger, way larger than people imagine. Because eventually you start asking, what exactly am I trying to develop? Right? If I'm developing balance, do I only have balance in the dojo? If I'm developing coordination, does coordination turn off when I put my shoes on? Huh? Am I trying to reduce unnecessary tension? Right? Relax. Okay. Can I notice that when I'm carrying my groceries? If I'm studying efficient movement, can I practice that while I'm opening a door or getting out of a chair or walking through a crowded room or putting on a jacket or putting my arm through the sleeve of a shirt or a jacket or my leg through a pair of pants, right? Can I coordinate the movement of the jacket and the movement of my arm so that they meet cleanly, right? Rather than fighting each other and trying to get the thing untangled and all that kind of stuff, right? And I know that sounds trivial until you understand what you're actually practicing. Doesn't matter if we're using a kata. Doesn't matter if we're using a henka. Doesn't matter if we're doing one of these things with a jacket or pair of pants or whatever, right? What are we practicing? Coordination, timing, spatial awareness, efficiency, articulation of the body. Now the dojo has expanded dramatically. Again, the dojo is a classroom. Keep going back to that school analogy. Okay? The classroom is where you learn the lesson. Okay? The lab is where you put things into practice or you test things or whatever. Okay? So, anyway, I think we're going to put everything else on standby here, right? So, got plenty to cover for another episode. James, questions, comments, complaints? Damn, Sensei, you talk a lot.
I do not see anything.
Because they're all asleep. That's what it is. No, I don't know what it is. Doesn't matter. All right.
Kyle and Alan insist that they're still wide awake.
Oh, well, there you go. Okay. See, not me, Sensei. I'm paying attention. See, ooh, pick me. Anyway, so, all right. So a couple of things coming up. Just a quick reminder for everybody, if you're listening to this way farther into my future. So we are doing this right now, August 24th of 2026. So, right. We have this Sunday coming up, August 30th it's the first in a series of 4 small weapons. My dog thinks she's protecting the house. Small weapons seminars, right? We're covering the Kusari Fundo, right? Not just basics, swinging and striking and grappling and that kind of stuff. But we're also going to be looking at it as a model for other items. And it's one thing to intellectually go, oh, I know I could use a belt or I could, okay. Yeah. Okay. But also, how do we apply the Kihon techniques with the weapon? Okay. That kind of stuff. And how can the weapon uncover and or make, right? How can it fix or make our taijutsu better, right? Because I promise, every mistake you make with your taijutsu, a Kusari Fundo, will amplify. How about it, James? It's very flexible. It's stupid. It does not care. It will hurt whatever it hits, right? If you have a glitch in your movement, it's going to follow it, okay? Yeah, so that's coming up this Sunday, noon to 5. And there's live at the dojo. There's also a virtual option. Also, next month, we've got another one. I think that one's with Tonto. We're skipping October because October has our fall camp. And there's something else, some other training going on in there. And then November, December, we have 2. We have Shuriken, and then we have Hambo. Yeah. And then next month, leading up to, as a prerequisite for folks for fall camp, because camp is going to focus on lessons from the sword. The sword's going to act as our teacher, so to speak, right? To help to reinforce lessons or uncover mistakes that are going on in our taijutsu, or when we're using other weapons, knife or hanbo or whatever. So I am doing an intro to sword. It's a 4-week course that information will be up shortly for, and then we just have a bunch of stuff that's going on. So hopefully everybody will be able to make it for training. The fall intensive is October, was that 16th, 17th, and 18th. And then our New Year's seminar at Daikomyo-sai in January. That's the weekend of the 8th through the 10th. And we are returning to basics, returning to Kihon, but not in the way that most people think. We are returning to Kihon to get those Kihon closer to combat ready, closer to street ready. So lots of things to cover here in the coming weeks. Next week, we're going to drill down even deeper into the practice things. But this week, moving into Whiteboard Wednesday, we're going to be taking a look at the curriculum again, but we're going to be taking a look at connections between techniques. This is where somebody moves from being introduced to lessons and seeing the techniques in the curriculum as being separate to moving to another level where they can see the connections and how the techniques start becoming variations of each other. Right. So for the Friday masterclass, we'll be looking at 2 sets of 3 techniques each, and some part of them, right? The attacks, either the attacks are all the same, and the responses end up getting varied, not where they can do whatever they want. Students will learn how each one of these things ends up being a conditional answer when something changes. Okay. So we're going to pull a group of 3 from mod 1 and a group of 3 from mod 2, not because I'm trying to not do advanced techniques or whatever. I want to pull models that people already know and they should know well. So when we do it, we can then ramp up the pressure and or some part of it so that students can practice decision-making under pressure. They're actually going to find that they're practicing the discern stage in our 5Ds model, but it's decision-making under pressure. So I want to make sure that they have them, but so they can explore things at the decision-making level and not at the repeating choreography level, so to speak. So anyway, it'll be a fun week. So hopefully I'll see everybody. I know I'll see a bunch of you in class, but those who are long distance, either see you for the Nimpo Masterclass that goes on tomorrow night or Whiteboard Wednesday when is that? Wednesday. Yeah. So anything else pop up, James?
No, sir.
All right. Well, as always, I thank you, and I will talk to everybody else. Yeah, everybody else again next time on Kuden.